Hi, I'm Emily from the Bowen Branch Library. Welcome to our middle grade book club. We are working through the Scorpio Races by ScorpioSteifvater4 with permission from Scholastic. Thank you, Scholastic. We hope you enjoyed our last reading. We read the prologue through chapter 3. Today we're going to be working on chapter 4 through 7. Make sure that you check the description box at the bottom of the video for our discussion questions for this chapter, or a couple of chapters. Chapter 4, Sean. I am dreaming of the sea when they wake me. Actually, I'm dreaming of the night that I caught Corr, but I can hear the sea in my dream. There is an old wives' tale that kabalushka caught at night are faster and stronger, and so it is 3 a.m, and I am crouching on a boulder at the base of the cliffs, several hundred feet from the sand beach. Above me, the sea has made an arch in the chalk, the ceiling 100 feet over my head, and the white walls hug me. It should be dark, hidden from the moon, but the ocean reflects light off the pale rock, and I can see just well enough not to stumble on the coarse, kelp-covered rocks on the floor. The stone beneath my feet has more in common with the sea floor than the shore, and I have to take care not to lose my footing on the slippery surface. I am listening, in the dark, in the cold. I am listening for a change in the sound of the ocean. The water is rising quickly and silently. The tide is coming in an hour this incomplete cave will be full of seawater higher than my head. I am listening for the sound of a splash, for the rush of a hoof breaking the surface, for any hint that a kabalushka is emerging. Because by the time you hear a hoof click on the stones, you are dead. But there is nothing but the eerie silence of the sea, no seabirds at night, no shouts of boys on the shore, no distant hum of a boat's motor. The wind is ruthless as it finds me in the arch. Unbalanced by its sudden force, I slip and catch my balance again on the wall, my fingers splayed. I hurriedly pull my hand back. The walls of the arch are covered with blood-red jellies that wink and glisten at me by the light of the moon. My father told me they were completely harmless. I don't believe him. Nothing is completely harmless. Below me, the water creeps between the boulders as the tide comes in. My palm is bleeding. I hear a sound, like a kitten mewling or a baby screaming, and I freeze. There are no kittens or babies here on the beach. There is only me and the horses. Brian Carroll has told me that when he is out at sea at night, he can sometimes hear the horses calling to each other under the water, and it sounds like whale song, or a widow wailing, or something chuckling. I look down to the water in the deepest cleft of the rocks below me. It has risen fast. How long have I been standing here? The boulders in front of me are already nothing but shiny humps of rock barely above the black water. I am empty-handed, but I am also out of time. I need to turn back and pick my way across the seaweed-slimed rocks while I still can. I look at my hand. A thick trickle of blood has welled in my palm and down between the 2 bones of my arm. It gathers, swells, drips soundlessly into the water. My palm will hurt later. I looked at the water where my blood disappears. I am silent. The cave is silent. I turn around, and there is a horse. It is close enough to smell the briny odor of it, close enough to feel the warmth off its still wet skin, close enough to look into its eye and see its dilated square pupil. I smell blood on its breath, and then they wake me. It is Brian and Jonathan Carroll, and their faces both spell concern. Brian's face wears the traditional brand, furrowed eyebrows, lips puckered. Jonathan's comes out as an apologetic smile that changes shape every few seconds. Brian is my age, and I know him from the piers. We both deal with the water for our living, and so we have a history together, though we are not friends. Jonathan is his brother, trailing Brian in every way, including brains. "Kendrick," says Brian, "you up?" I am now. I lie there in my bunk like I am tied to it and say nothing. Jonathan adds, "Sorry to wake you, mate." "You're the man," Brian says. Though I'm feeling no kinship for him now in the middle of the night, I don't mind Brian. He says what he means. There's nothing else for it. Mutt's in a world of trouble. He had a mind to wait up for one of the cobble to come out of the water, and now he's gotten what he asked for, and I don't think he likes it. "It's going to kill them," Jonathan says. He looks pleased to have been able to state something so obvious before Brian could. "Them," I echo. It's cold, and I am wide awake. "Mutt and a bunch of his mates. They're all in it, and they've got the cobble sort of caught, but they can't let it go, and they can't bring it in." Now I'm sitting. I don't have any love in the world for Mutt, also known as Matthew Malvern, the bastard son of my boss, or any of the grooms who scurry in submissive friendship behind him. But they can't leave a horse tangled up on the beach in whatever fool trap they've devised. "You're the one for the horses, Kendrick," Brian says. "I reckon someone's going to get killed unless we fetch you back there." Back there. Now I understand their expressions. They were part of this, and they know that I'll think less of them for it. I don't say anything else. Just get out of bed, pulling on my old sweater and snatching up my greased black-blue coat with all my things in its pockets. I jerk my chin toward the door, and they scurry before me like sandpipers, Jonathan wrenching the door open so that Brian can lead the way out of the stable. Outside, the wind is a live, starving thing. The sky over Skarmouth is a dull brown, lit by the streetlights, but everywhere else is inky. There's a bit of a moon, so it will be brighter by the ocean, but not much. We strike out across the fields, taking the straightest path to the beach. There's nothing out here but rocks and sheep, but it's easy enough to fall over either of them. Torch, I say, and Brian flicks on a flashlight and offers it to me. I shake my head. I'll need my hands free. Behind us, Jonathan jogs and trips, keeping up with our pace, making a beam of light arc crazily as his flashlight hand jerks. I'm reminded of my mother pretending to write words on the walls with a flashlight when the storm knocked out our power. How far up the beach? I ask. The tide will be coming in a few hours, and if they are around the point, a new Kabalushka will be the least of their problems. Not far, pants Brian. He is not unfit, but strenuous activity tends to wind him. If not for their expressions earlier, I would have stopped to let him catch his breath. I can just see where the hills split and cleft for the path down to the sand. The land is a darker black against the sky, and then I hear a scream. The wind carries it to us high and thin and ragged, and it is impossible to say whether it is human or animal. The hairs on the back of my neck prickle in a warning I ignore as I break into a run. Brian does not follow my lead. I don't think he can, and I sense that Jonathan is torn between staying with Brian and accompanying me. I need the torch, Jonathan, I shout back over my shoulder. The wind throws my words behind me, and though Jonathan replies, I can't hear him. I pelt out of the dim circle of his flashlight and down into the darkness, stumbling and slipping down the steep descent to the beach. For a brief moment I think I can't go forward any more because I cannot see, but then I step a few feet on and glimpse a knot of wildly moving flashlights down on the sand. Beyond them I see the water dimly illuminated by the scant light of the moon. The wind is sucking the sound away from me, so as I approach the scene, it seems as if the men are voiceless. The struggle is almost artful until you get up to it. It's 4 men, and they've snagged a gray water horse around its neck and by the pastern on one of its hind legs, right above the hoof. They tug and they jump back as the horse lunges and retreats, but they are in a bad place and they know it. They have the tiger by its tail, and have just realized the tail is long enough for the claws to reach them. "Kendrick!" shouts someone. I cannot tell who it is. "Where's Brian?" "Sean Kendrick!" shouts someone else, and this, I know, is Mutt, holding the line that leads to the horse's neck. I can tell by the shape of his silhouette, the broad shoulders and thick neck that is both neck and chin. "Who asked for him to come? Go back to sleep, Knacker. I've got this under control." He controls the horse like a fishing boat controls the sea. I see now that the other line is held by Paget, an older man who should know better than to trust Mutt with his life. Next to me, I hear a soft sound in a moment between gusts of wind. I glance over, and there is another of Mutt's friends sitting against the rock wall where the cliffs meet the beach. He is curled around his own arms, and one of them he holds gingerly. It looks broken. The sound I heard was his whimper. "Get out of this, Kendrick," Mutt calls. I cross my arms over my chest and wait. The horse has stopped struggling for the moment. Against the light chalk of the cliffs I can see the trembling dark lines leading to the Kabalushka. The horse is tiring, but so are the others. Mutt's muscled arms mimic the shaking of the lines. The other men creep around, laying loops of rope on the beach, hoping the horse will step into one. It would be easy, for someone who didn't know the water horses, to think that the Kabalushka standing there with its sides heaving is defeated. But I see its head drawn back, predatory, raptor-like rather than equine, and I know that things are about to get ugly. "Mutt," I say. He doesn't even turn his head, but at least I said it. The line, holding the horse's pastern, suddenly stretches taut as the grey cobble lunges towards Mutt. I am sprayed with sand and small pebbles from its hooves digging into the beach. Shouts punch the air. Paget reels and tugs on his line, working to off-center the horse. Mutt is too busy with his own welfare to return the favor. The line around its neck suddenly slack. The horse backs towards Paget. Its hooves drag circles in the sand, and then the horse is on Paget, teeth sunk into his shoulder, front legs reared up and embracing him. It seems impossible that Paget will not fall to the ground under the weight, but the horse's grip on his shoulders hold him upright for a brief moment before it falls to its knees, Paget tucked beneath its chest. Now Mutt is hauling on the line around the horse's neck, but it is too little, too late. And what is he against one of the Kabelushka? Paget is beginning to look improbable. Something about him is starting to look less like a man and more like meat. I hear plaintively from one of the men, "Kendrick!" I step forward, and right as I get to the horse, I spit on the fingers of my left hand and grab a handful of its mane at its poll, right behind its ears. Pulling a red ribbon from the pocket of my jacket with my right hand, I press it over the bones of the horse's nose. It jerks, but my hand on its skull and neck is firm. I whisper in its ear, and it staggers back, punching a hoof into Paget's body as it struggles to find its footing again. Paget is not my concern. My concern is that I have 2,000 pounds of wild animal being held by a string, and it has maimed 2 men already, and I need to get it away from the rest of them before I lose my tenuous grip. "Don't you dare let that horse go," Mutt tells me. "Not after all this. You bring it back to the stable. Don't let this be a waste." I want to tell him that this is a water horse, not a dog, and that leading it inland away from the nearly November salt water is a trick I don't feel like performing at the moment. But I don't want to shout out loud and give the horse any more cause to remember that I am right next to it. "Do what you need to do, Kendrick," yells Brian, who has finally made it down. "Don't you dare let that horse go," Mutt shouts back. Just to get them all out alive would be a feat. Just to get the horse down to the shore and release it far enough into the ocean that we could get away safe would be impressive. But I can do more than just get them away safe, and they all know it. Mutt Malvern most of all. But I whisper like the sea in the horse's ear and take a step back from the roving flashlights. 1 step away from all of them, 1 step towards the ocean. My sock wicks the tide into my boots. The grey horse is trembling under my hands. I turn to look at Mutt, and then I let the horse go. Chapter 5. Puck. I don't think that I sleep, but I do, because in the morning my eyes are sticky and my blankets look like a mole has tunneled through them. The sky outside the window is the blue of almost daylight, and I decide that no matter what time it is, I'm awake. I spend too long standing shivering in my sleeping top, the one with the straps of lace that are just a little itchy, but that I wear anyway because Mum made it, staring at the contents of my dresser, trying to decide what to wear to the beach. I don't know if it will be cold after I've been riding for a while, and I don't know if I want to go down there dressed like a girl when Joseph Barringer is probably going to be there looking at me like her. Mostly I'm trying not to think grandiose things like, "You will remember this day for the rest of your life." In the end, I just wear what I always wear. My brown pants that won't chafe, and my chunky dark green sweater that Mum's mother knitted for her. I like to think of Mum wearing it. It gives the sweater history. I look into my spotted mirror and make a fierce face under my freckles, my eyebrows straight across over my blue eyes. I look messy and cross. I pull some of my hair out of my ponytail across my forehead, trying to look like someone other than the girl I grew up being. Someone people won't laugh at when they see me arrive on the beach. It doesn't work. I have too many freckles. I draw my hair back into the ponytail again. In the kitchen, Finn is already up, and he is standing at the sink. He is wearing the same sweater as yesterday, and he looks like a man who has shrunk in the night while his clothing pooled around him. Something smells sort of brittle and carbon-like, almost good, like steak or toast, until I realize that it's actually a bad smell, like burned paper and hair. "Gabe awake?" I ask. I peer uncertainly into the cupboard to avoid having to look at Finn. I'm not sure I want to talk. Looking in the cupboard, I'm not sure I want to eat either. "He's already gone to the hotel," Finn says. Here." And with this, he sets a mug with a spoon standing in it down on the table. It's got stains of whatever's in it on the sides in such a way that I just know it's going to leave a ring on the table, but it's steaming, and I suspect that it's hot chocolate. "You made this?" Finn looks at me. "No. St. Anthony brought it to me in the night. He was very put out I didn't give it to you right then." He turned back around. I am shocked, both by the reappearance of Finn's humor and the gift of the hot chocolate. I see now that the counter is an absolute mess of pots that Finn used to distill a single cup of cocoa, and I'm certain now that the odor hanging on the air is the smell of spilt milk on the hot burner. But it doesn't matter in the face of his intention. It sort of makes my lower lip not quite sure of itself, but I clamp my teeth on it for a moment until everything's steady. By the time Finn sits down on the other side of the table with a mug of his own, I'm normal again. "Thanks," I say, and Finn looks uncomfortable. Mum used to say he was like a fairy. He didn't like to be thanked. I add, "Sorry." "I put salt in it," Finn tells me, as if this eliminates the need to be grateful. I try it. It's good. If there's salt in it, I can't taste it around the floating islands of partially stirred cocoa. They dissolve in my mouth in not unpleasant lumps of powder. I can't remember if Finn has ever made cocoa before. I think he only ever watched me. I can't tell there's salt in it. Salt, Finn says, makes cocoa sweeter. I think this is a pretty stupid thing to say, because how could something not sweet make something sweeter? But I let it pass. I stir my cocoa and mash a few of the lumps of cocoa against the side of the mug with the back of the spoon. Finn knows I don't believe him, though, and says, "Go and ask at Paulson's, then. I watched them make the cocoa muffins. With salt." "I didn't say I didn't believe you. I didn't say anything at all." He mashes a spoon in his own cup. "I know you didn't." He doesn't ask me how long I'll be gone today, or how I'm going to get a horse to ride, or anything about Gabe. I can't decide if I'm glad not to talk about it, or if it's driving me crazy that he's not. We just slurp down the rest of our drinks, and when I get up to put my mug in the sink, I finally say, "I guess I'll be gone most of the day." Finn gets up and puts his mug next to mine. He looks very serious, his neck skinny and turtle-like, poking out over the oversized sweater. He points to the counter behind me. Among the wreck of pots and dishes is a cut-up apple, with bits of crumb from the counter stuck to one of the cut edges. "That's for Dove." "I want to come with you today." "You can't come with me," I say, without stopping to think about how his words make me feel. "Not every day," Finn said. "Just today. Just the first day." I battle momentarily with the image of myself emerging on the beach proud and lonesome versus the reality of arriving with one of my brothers to watch from the sidelines and see how it's done. "Okay. That would be good." Finn gets his hat. I get my hat. I knitted both of them myself, and mine is patterned in white and 2 different shades of brown. Finn's is red and white. They're lumpy, but they fit. In our hats, we stand among the wreckage of the kitchen. For a moment, I see the room like anyone else might see it. It looks like everything around Finn has crawled out of the mouth of the kitchen sink drain. It's a mess, and we're a mess, and no wonder Gabe wants to leave. "Let's go," I say. Chapter 6. Sean. That first day, Corr has me come down to the beach before anyone else to try a Piebald mare he has dredged from the ocean some indeterminate time before. He is so certain that I will want her for Malvern that he's priced her high enough for 2 horses. Under the dark blue early morning sky, the tide just starting to pull back from the sand, my fingers frozen where they poke from my fingerless gloves, I watch him trot her back and forth for me. Her hoof prints are the first on the beach. The tide has wiped the sand clean, removing all traces of Mutt's botched efforts the night before. She's striking. Water horses come in every color that normal land horses do, but like land horses, most are bay or chestnut. Less often dun, or palomino, or black or grey. It's very rare to find a piebald water horse, equally black and white, sharp white clouds across a black field. But flashy color doesn't win races. The piebald mare doesn't move terribly. She has a good shoulder. Lots of kabalushka have good shoulders. Unimpressed, I watch black cormorants spin through the sky above us, their silhouettes like small dragons. Corr brings the mare to me. I hitch myself onto her back and look down at Corr. "She's the fastest kabalushka you'll ever sit on," he says in his grainy voice. Corr is the fastest kabalushka I've ever sat on. Beneath me, the Piebald mare smells like copper and rotting seaweed. Her eye, turned toward me, weeps seawater. I don't like the feel of her, sinuous and hard to hold. But then I am used to Corr. "Take her out," Corr says. "Tell me you can find anything faster." I let her trot. She minces through the packed sand towards the water, ears pinned to her mane. I thumb my iron pieces out from my sleeves and track them counterclockwise on her withers, right on a heart-shaped spot of white. She shudders and twists her body away from my touch. I don't like the unhorse-like tilt to her head, or the way that she never unpins her ears. None of the horses are to be trusted, but I trust her less than most. Corr urges me to gallop her, feel her speed for myself. I doubt there is anything she can do at a gallop to convince me that what she is like at a trot is worth it, but I let out her reins and nudge her sides. She is down the beach like an osprey diving for a fish, breathlessly fast, and always conscious of the water, angling towards the sea. And again, that sinuous, slippery movement. She seems far less horse than sea creature to me, even now, even in the deep of October, even on dry land, even with me whispering in her ear. But she is fast. Her strides eat the sand, and we pass by the cove that marks the end of the good surface in only seconds. The rush of speed bursts through me like bubbles popping on the surface of water. I don't want to think of her as faster than Corr, but she must be close. Anyway, how can I know without him there? It's beginning to get rocky. When I move to slow her, the Piebald courses upward in her rear, her teeth snapping, predatory. All of a sudden she smells overwhelmingly of the sea. Not of the beach, which is what most people think is the odor of the sea. Not of seaweed or of salt, but of your head beneath the surface, breathing water, lungs full of the ocean. The iron has no effect as we pelt toward the water. My fingers work through her mane, tying knots in 3s and 7s. I sing in her ear, and all the while my inside hand turns her in smaller and smaller circles, each one away from the water. Nothing is sure. As we charge across the sand, the magic in her calls to me, insidious. Precious little of my bare skin touches her, a wrist against her neck perhaps, though my leg is guarded inside my boots. But still, her pulse hums through me, lulling me to trust, compelling me to join her in the sea. It's only a decade of riding dozens of the water horses that allows me to remember myself, and only barely. Everything in me says to abandon the struggle, fly with her into the water. 3s, 7s, iron across my palm. I whisper, "You will not be the one to drown me." It feels like minutes to slow her, to bring her back toward Gory, but it's probably only seconds. And all the while her neck still feels snaky to me, and her teeth are still bared in a way that no land horse would present them. She's trembling beneath me. It's hard to forget how swift she was. "Didn't I tell you she was the fastest thing you'd ever ride?" Gory asked. I slide off her and hand him the reins. He takes them with a puzzled expression on his already puzzling face. I say, "This mare is going to kill someone." "Hey, now," Gory objects. Then, "They've all killed someone." "I want no part of her," I say, even though part of me does. "Someone else will buy her, and then you will be sorry." "That someone else will be dead," I replied. "Throw her back." I turn away. Behind me I hear Gory say, "She's faster than your red stallion." "Throw her back," I repeat, not turning around. I know he won't. Chapter 7. Puck. I didn't reckon that it would be awful. But the whole island is crammed onto the beach, it feels like. Finn convinced us to take the Morris, which promptly broke down, so we arrived after just about everybody else. In front of us there are 2 seas, one far-off ocean of deep blue and one seething mass of horses and men. All of them are men, not a girl among them unless you count Tommy Falk, because his lips are so pretty. The men are 1,000 times louder than the ocean. I don't see how they can train or move or breathe. They're all shouting at the horses and at each other. It's like a big argument, but I can't tell who's mad at who. Finn and I both hesitate on the long sloped path down to the beach. The ground beneath our feet is uneven with divots from horses that have been led down already. Finn frowns as he looks at the collection of people and animals. But my eye is caught instead by a horse galloping at the faraway edge of the sucked-out tide. It is bright red, like fresh blood, with a small, dark figure crouched low on its back. Every few strides the horse's hooves hit the very edge of the surf and water sprays up. The sight of the horse galloping, stretched out, breathlessly fast, is so beautiful that my eyes prickle. "That one looks like 2 horses stuck together," Finn says. His observation pulls my gaze away from the red horse and closer to the cliffs. "That's a Piebald," I tell him. The mare he's gesturing to is snowy white, splashed with big patches of black. Near her withers she has a small black spot that looks like a bleeding heart. A tiny little gnome of a man in a bowler hat is leading her away from the others. "That's a Piebald," mimics Finn. I smack him and look back to where the red horse and rider were, but they're gone. I feel strangely put out. "I guess we should go down," I say. "Is everybody down there today?" Finn asks. "Sure looks like it." "How are you going to get a horse?" Because I don't exactly have an answer, the question annoys me. I'm annoyed even more when I notice we're both standing in exactly the same position, so either I was standing like my brother or he was standing like me. I take my hands out of my pockets and snap, "Is this riddle day? Are you going to ask me questions all day?" Finn makes his mouth and his eyebrows into parallel lines. He's very good at this face, although I don't know exactly what it means. When he was little, Mum called him a frog because of this face. Now that he sometimes has to shave, it doesn't look so much like an amphibian. Anyway, he makes the frog face and sidles off into the commotion. For a moment I think about going after him, but I'm suddenly pasted to the ground by a shrill wail. It's the Piebald mare. She's separated from the others, looking back either towards them or towards the sea. Her head's thrown back, but she's not whinnying. She's screaming. The keening cuts through the wind, the sound of the surf, the bustle of activity. It's the wail of an ancient predator. It's 1,000 miles away from any sound that a natural horse would make. And it's horrible. All I can think is, Is this the last thing my parents heard? If I'm going to lose my nerve if I don't get onto the beach right now. I know it. I can feel it. My limbs feel like seaweed. I'm so wobbly that I almost turn my ankle on one of the divots left by the hooves. I'm relieved when the Piebald mare stops her crying, but I still can't ignore that the Kabalushka don't even smell like proper horses as I get closer to them. Dove smells soft, all hay and grass and molasses. The Kabalushka smell like salt and meat and waste and fish. I try to breathe through my mouth and not think about it. There are dogs careening around my legs, and nobody is looking where he's going. Horses are clawing at the air, and men are hawking insurance and protection to the riders. They're more riled up than terriers in a butcher shop. I'm glad that Finn stormed off, because the idea of him seeing me totally bewildered seems unbearable. The truth is, I have a very rough idea of how to go about securing a horse for the race without money up front, but it's mostly based on things that we used to talk about in school, when the boys would all boast that they were going to ride in the races when they grew up. They never really did. Mostly they just moved away to the mainland or became farmers, but their big plans were a good source of information, especially since my family was one of the few that didn't follow the races. "Girl!" snarls a man, holding a roan horse that is pawing and charging, galloping without moving an inch. "Mind your damn feet!" I stare down at my feet, and it takes me a second too long to realize that there was a circle drawn in the sand, and my boots have scuffed a line through it. I jump out of the circle. "Don't bother!" shouts the man as I try to retrace the line out of the circle. The roan tugs towards the break in the line. I back up and get shouted at again for my trouble. 2 men are carrying an older boy away between them. He's bleeding from his head and he swears at me. I whirl around and almost trip over a scruffy dog with sand in its fur. "Curse you!" I snap at the dog, just because it won't say anything back. "Puck Connolly?" It's Tommy Falk with his pretty lips. "What are you doing down here?" At least, that's what I think he says. It's so loud that other people's conversations drown out most of his words, and the wind robs the rest. "I'm looking for bowler hats," I say. Black bowler hats are supposed to mean dealers. On the rest of the island, someone wearing one is called a monger, after the horsemongers, and it's not the nicest of names. Sometimes the boys wear them if they want to be seen as rebels. Mostly it just means they're pissers. Tommy shouts, "I didn't hear you right!" But I know he did. He just doesn't believe what he heard. Dad once said people's brains are hard of hearing. It doesn't matter if Tommy's stone-cold deaf on a plate, though, because I catch a glimpse of a bowler hat on the head of the little gnome man who had the Piebald mare earlier. "Thanks," I tell Tommy, though he hasn't really helped. I leave him behind and wind through the crowd toward the gnome. Up close, the man does not look quite so short, but he does look like his face has been hit solidly a few times with a brick, twice to really squish it, and once more for good measure. He is arguing with someone. "Sean Kendrick," spits the monger, which is a name that sounds familiar for some reason, especially said in that disdainful note. The bowler-hatted gnome doesn't have a gnome-like voice at all. His voice is lined with cigarette smoke, and he puts gritty H's at the beginning of his words. "Huh, his head's half full of salt water. What's he saying about my horses now?" "I don't like to repeat it," replies the other figure politely. It's Dr. Halsell, with his shiny black hair parted neatly on the side. I like Dr. Halsell. He's very level-headed, and he's a very compact, tidy sort of person, who reminds me of a drawing of a person instead of an actual person. I wanted to marry him when I was 6. "He's crazy as the ocean," says the bowler-hatted monger. "Come now, if you back her, you'll want her." "All the same," Dr. Halsell said, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to pass." "She's fast as the devil," the gnome says, but the doctor is already retreating, and his back doesn't listen. "Excuse me," I say, and my voice sounds very high to me. The gnome turns. His mismatched face is fearsome when matched with an irritable expression. I try to organize my thoughts into a respectable-sounding question. "Do you do fifths?" Fifths is another thing I learned about from the daydreaming boys. It's gambling, more or less. Sometimes a monger will let you have a horse for nothing, on the condition that whatever you win in the race, they get 4/5 of it. That's not really anything, unless you come in first. Then you could buy the whole island if you wanted. Well, at least most of Skarmouth, except for what Benjamin Malvern owns. The gnome looks at me. "No," he says, but I can tell what he really means is, "not for you." I feel a little shaky inside, because it hadn't occurred to me that they would say no. Were there that many people who would ride Kabalushka that the mongers could be choosy? I hear myself say, "Okay, could you point me towards someone else who might?" I say hurriedly, "Sir." Because Dad once said that saying "sir" makes gentlemen out of ruffians. The gnome says, "Bowler hats? Ask 'em." Some ruffians stay ruffians. When I was younger, I would have spit on his shoes, but Mum had broken me of the habit with the help of a small blue stool and lots of soap. So I just leave without saying thanks. He was even less help than pretty Tommy Falk, and I wind my way through the crowd looking for the next bowler hat, only to get the same results. All of them say no to the ginger-haired girl. They don't even consider it. One frowns and laughs, and one doesn't even let me finish my sentence. By now it's lunchtime, and my stomach is snarling at me. There are people hawking food to the riders, but it's expensive, and everything smells like blood and bad fish. There's no sign of Finn. The tide is starting to creep in, and some of the less brave souls have already left the beach. I retreat a bit and press my back against the chalk cliffs, my hands spread out on the cold surface. Several feet above my head, the chalk is lighter, marking where the water will rise in a few hours. I imagine standing here until it does, salt water slowly swallowing me. Tears of frustration burn behind my eyes. The worst of it is that I am sort of glad they all said no. These terrifying monsters are not at all like Dove, and I can't even start to imagine myself trying one out, much less taking it home and training it to eat expensive bloody meat instead of me. In the summer, children sometimes catch dragonflies and tie strings around them just behind their eyes and lead them like they are pets. Those dragonflies are what these grown men look like with the kabalushka. The horses race them around like they have no weight whatsoever. What would they do to me? I look out across the sea. Close to the shore, the water is turquoise in places where white rocks have fallen from the cliffs into the water, and black where dark brown kelp covers the boulders. Somewhere across all these buckets of water are the cities we'll lose Gabe to. I know we'll never see him again. It won't matter that he's still alive somewhere. It will be just as bad as Mum and Dad. Mum liked to say that some things happen for a reason, that sometimes obstacles were there to stop you from doing something stupid. She said this to me a lot, but when she said it to Gabe, Dad told him that sometimes it just means you need to try harder. I take a deep breath and head back toward the only bowler hat who doesn't avoid my eye, the gnome. He has only one horse in his hands now, the Piebald mare that screamed earlier. Heh, you. He says this as if I'm about to pass him by. I think we need to talk, I tell him. I feel unfriendly and messy. Any charm I had when I started this is back at home with the makings of a sandwich. I was thinking the same thing. I'm about to be off. I'd rather not be back tomorrow, and you'd rather have a cobble. What will you give me for her? My first reaction is to think, well, how much do I have? And then I come to my senses and remember his unhelpfulness from earlier. Nothing up front, I say. I have to be firm on this. If Gabe really does leave us to fend for ourselves, we'll have nothing in the end either. I'm just looking for a fifth. This mare is amazing, the gnome says. Fastest thing on land at the moment. He stands back so I can see her, restless on the end of the lead, a chain wrapped over her nose and fed through her halter. She is drop-dead gorgeous and absolutely giant. I feel I could stack Dove on top of Dove and only then be able to look the Piebald in her wild eye. She stinks like a corpse washed up after a storm. She eyes one of the loose dogs that darts around the beach. Something about her gaze is deeply unsettling. Then you wouldn't mind taking a gamble on her, I say. I feel petulant, but I try to sound businesslike. It's not the easiest thing in the world trying to be treated like an adult during a negotiation when the idea of driving a successful bargain is making you a little sick to your stomach. I'm not in the mood to come back and collect, the monger. I cross my arms. I pretend I'm Gabe. He has a way of looking both unimpressed and disinterested when he's really both of these things. I sound as bored as possible. Either she's everything you say or she isn't. If she's the fastest thing on 4 legs, do you trust her to win more than you could sell her for? The gnome eyes me. It's not her I don't trust. I glower at him. I was just thinking the same thing. He grins suddenly. Get up on her then, the monger says. Let's see what you got. He jerks his head towards the saddle, tipped up on its pommel on the sand. I take a deep breath and try not to remember her scream from earlier. I try not to think about how my parents died. I need to think about Gabe and his face when he said he was leaving. I feel like my hands are fluttering, but they're quite still at my sides. I can do this. That's the end of Chapter 7. Thank you so much for joining us for this section. We will see you next time for Chapter 8 and a couple beyond that. Make sure that you check the description box at the bottom of the video, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.